Hi there, it's a Tuesday, so it's time for another in real life video. This time, the topic is a viewer submitted one. The general viewer who submitted it, their username should be on the screen sometime around now. Anyway, sorry I had to bring up the little document that has the question in it. They ask, how do you manage playing an RPG all the way through and consistently multiple days a week? Which I guess is kind of a question of how is it that you don't get tired of it and sit the game down or fall off of it or something? Especially since I play a lot of, well, pretty much most of the games, if not all of them. I do as much as possible. Not necessarily 100% because sometimes there's ways to get 100% completion in a single playthrough that are, I don't know, beyond the purview of a regular playthrough, right? You have to do some weird exploit or do something extra or something like that. And oftentimes I don't go through that much trouble, but certainly I do like every quest. I try to find all the collectibles and stuff like that. It's very true that this is not something that too many people do nowadays, especially you'll hear the closer that someone works in a sense related to games, whether you are, from what I've heard, whether you are like in any fashion working on games, whether you are like reviewing them, or pretty much anything except for doing playthroughs, you typically don't finish everything in the game. Even if you're reviewing it and you are the type of person, I want to see the game to the end before I sort of write out or record my review or whatever. You don't typically get, like, I don't know, every single collectible. That's fairly rare. The only folks who typically do everything are people who tend to do, like, playthroughs, let's plays, or folks who do guides, like big tutorials and stuff like that. Whether it be on a video, a wiki, or some sort of write-up or whatever. So yeah, that's really the big first main one, right? The most obvious one is that by way of having a YouTube channel where I do Let's Plays, I'm very much incentivized to finish the game, right? That's definitely a big no-no. If you are running a Let's Play channel, doing playthroughs, you don't want to set a precedent that, especially when early on, if you don't have any sort of established viewer base, people who are already familiar with you, who know, like, oh, I understand why this person put down this game because it just didn't click with them for this reason, right? If people are less familiar with you, you know, then they will see, oh, this person, they never finished games, so whether or not something funny happens along the way, why is it worth my time if it wasn't worth their time to finish playing the game and doing the playthrough? You're massively incentivized to finish the games if you're doing specifically a Let's Play playthrough sort of channel. Same goes for if you're streaming, right? If you are streaming the sorts of games that are not infinite, you are effectively incentivized in that same way to finish the game by the audience, right? And just as well, at least in the case of videos, after you've made the video, people are still going to watch older videos. I've always said in a ton of our videos as well, and a ton of the playthroughs, that the greatest strength, and a lot of other folks will say this too, I'm sure, one of the greatest strengths of a playthrough Let's Play channel is having an enormous backlog, right? The more you can do to make it to where, and this is a term that a lot of folks will use as well, even beyond Let's Plays, they will say that it's good to have evergreen videos, right? And a playthrough should technically be evergreen, right? It should technically be something that is always worth watching, no matter how far out in the future it is. The only hard part is getting it found out, right? Getting it discovered, getting eyes on it. We'll probably talk more about this in the future, because I do want to do a bunch of videos, effectively like a mini-series, giving sort of advice to other folks who are interested in pursuing this kind of thing. It's far from the only reason that I finish video games, but it is probably the most evident reason. It's probably the most readily apparent reason why I would be inclined to finish games. However, even before I started recording myself, I had worked into a process of just finishing games. I very much finished them. If I started them, it was very rare for me to not finish them to completion. And I think it only got more and more intense as time went on. I would be more inclined like, okay, I want to try and do everything there is in this game or whatever, right? A lot of that. How did I arrive at that state of mind to where I'm keen on it? I think a lot of it, to put it bluntly, is from growing up just incredibly poor. Over half, probably like 2/3, 75% of the way through elementary school from birth to that moment, we were super poor. We lived in a trailer, in a mobile home, not in a trailer park, but actually parked on the back of, way in the back, like, of this property that belonged to our relative, our family, for a long time. And it was kind of like this wooded area. It was a large acreage, very farm-like, not literally a farm, though. Certainly I did have relatives who owned and worked farms and stuff like that. But we lived there, and somehow, well, I'll tell you how, I was able to get video games, which was amazing. But the way it was is that, and I've mentioned this before in other videos, we have, and I still have this relative to this day, a great aunt who, at the time, was very decidedly middle class, whereas the rest of us were most certainly not. And, like a lot of relatives, they will be keen on spoiling younger members of the family in that way. And she did not have kids of her own in any way. So whenever it was time for gifts and stuff like that, and sometimes just randomly, I had another great aunt who would occasionally get, I'm not sure if it was like Social Security or something like that. I don't even know. Like I said, I was very young at the time. A lot of this stuff I wasn't even thinking of paying attention to. So forgive me. But I had these two great aunts, and they would very frequently get me like a video game or a video game console or something like that. Typically, it was not the newest thing out. There would usually be like a year or so after the fact that I would get this. And we were also we could rent. We could definitely do rentals, and we absolutely made use of that. We rented a whole lot of movies and video games as well, which probably, I mean, to be honest, it probably wasn't the best way to be spending what limited money we had. But I don't know. What can you do? If you've ever been super duper broke, you know how it is, right? Sometimes you just gotta do that to get through the fucking days, right? Sometimes it's very understandable. Sometimes you just need something. You gotta have something in order to get through it. But yeah, that was how I had a lot of that stuff growing up, despite the fact that we were super duper broke. Not like incredibly broke, but we were getting the sort of like government handouts and stuff like that. I was getting the free or reduced lunch at school. There was periods where we would get like very early on. I remember we would get groceries from this place where I don't know if any other folks would be familiar with this, but there would be, it's almost like a relic from a bygone era. But there would be sort of boxes of like for instance, I remember you could get cereal, right? And it was just a white box with like a black border, and the text said cereal on it. And there was stuff like that, like pastas. It would just say macaroni, right? It was very, very basic, just like that. And for quite some time, that's what we had gotten. We bought pretty much all of our clothes secondhand at thrift stores and stuff, which, I mean, frankly, I've definitely gotten back into doing that. Just, hey, thanks to the power of the internet, I've managed to sort of up the game there. And because I wasn't getting a lot of games and stuff very frequently, I was very keen to keep replaying them. The only situations where I wouldn't play through a game to completion was because I was just too young and stupid to be able to figure it out, or I was too young and scared to finish it, right? Either I for whatever reason, I just couldn't finish it myself. And in that case, I would usually watch like a family member do it, right? Sort of toward middle school, my mom was able to, very fortunately, start eking us out into also being middle class, being like lower middle class, as it were. Sometime around in middle school, or maybe it was late elementary, I can't remember. But she had gotten, we were able to get a mortgage for a house, and we moved out of the trailer and we had gotten a house, but we didn't really have money for much else. For quite some time, we had this big empty house and very little to put inside of it. We had practically no furniture. I remember for like the first few months, we didn't even really have a proper table to eat off of. I don't even know why we didn't have a proper table, to be honest. I'm not even sure why that was. I think it must have been some reason we couldn't haul our old table, because we certainly used to have one. I don't know. But regardless, I remember there was like a month or, I don't even know, like a month or 4, where, you know, those like deployable trays or whatever that you see in movies, or maybe you've done yourself, that you'll prop open and you'll have a TV dinner on in front of the television or whatever. Myself, my mom, and my dad, we would gather around that, and we would have instant ramen. We would just have like a big bowl, or not even a big bowl, a big paper plate with like made 2 packets of instant ramen, and we would just divvy that up and eat it. And that was just dinner. But as my mom was very very much able to, and very fortunately able to, start eking us out into lower middle class, and I think eventually into just like standard middle class, started having money and stuff to get games myself. I started to be able to like, oh yeah, oh my gosh, it's a holiday coming up. My mom knows that I really am interested in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, so somewhere back there behind me are my original Xbox copies of the Platinum Edition, obviously not new as soon as it came out, because we still couldn't quite do that, and the Game of the Year Edition. Like I said, very rarely got stuff as soon as it came out. But rest assured, beforehand, we had rented it at the store and made sure that I really enjoyed it, all that stuff. And basically, I just came to finish and play through games a whole lot because I just didn't have a whole lot to play, right? It sort of facilitated this behavior. It's sort of, I was encouraged to play through the games to the end and all of that, and just get as much as I could out of it, and sort of find my own fun, even if the game wasn't that great, or whatever, or there were parts of it that I didn't enjoy. I was still very much incentivized to do it by way of, well, it's gonna be a while until I get another video game, right? Either that, or we're gonna rent something, and the rental situation was not under my control, being a young kid. So that was basically it. Having to work with not much sort of made it to where I just developed this habit of playing through games very intensely and going through them, right? It wasn't, frankly, it wasn't until far later, toward like high school, and the advent of the Steam sale, that I really started picking up games that I never touched, just because they were so ridiculously cheap on the Steam sale. I was like, my God, this game is so cheap right now. This is cheaper than it would have been to rent a game when I was a kid, like 10 years ago or whatever, right? So I was like, well, geez, I've got some pocket money laying around, right? Got something from a birthday card or whatever. I'll like tell my mom and give her the cash, and she'll let me use her card or whatever, right? Something along those lines. And that's how a lot of that worked out. Sorry, not to go too deep onto my past with a lot of that. Maybe save more of that for a future video, whatever it is I personally feel comfortable talking about, and isn't going to, in some way, what would you say, like, not violate the privacy of, but like be kind of kind toward, be considerate toward sharing too much that involves other folks that are not me exclusively. Definitely something for me to be wary of, I think, going forward with that. And I think it's no coincidence I also gravitated toward games like, back in the day, like Morrowind. Free-to-play games at the time, and online games, even at that, were hardly in existence. They are like online functionality for games didn't really start becoming popularized until around the time I was in middle school, I think, right? Sure, they existed beforehand, but they weren't terribly accessible for lower income families, right? But games like Morrowind were enormous. You could talk about with your friends and all of that. And you could, it's probably, it's not a great way to look at it from a review standpoint if you are reviewing something, because time and money means different things to different people. But certainly to myself and to a lot of other folks in that position, hour per dollar was 100% a real metric by which to measure a game, right? And like I said, you certainly hear from like game devs and stuff like that, like, there's short games that are amazing experiences that you're not going to get to even out to at least $1 per 1 hour spent in the game. If you run by that metric, you're going to miss out on a lot of amazing stuff. But sometimes you don't have that luxury, as it were, to sort of operate in that way. And that's basically, in a sense, I think, pretty much how I've come to arrive at the point where I'm keen on playing games and playing them regularly, right? I've developed a habit to where if I start a game that can be finished, I'm very liable to finish it. Either that, or now with like the advent of Game Pass and stuff like that, other subscription services, I do think that there's and probably for the best, there's sort of an incentivization to try something out, right? But in that case, if you try it out and you don't like it, you usually put it down and don't pick it back up. Maybe never again, within about an hour's time, something like that. In a future video, maybe even the next one, I would like to talk about, somewhat tangentially related to this, sort of avoiding burnout in doing this. Not just in recording, or not just in playing the game, but in recording it and sort of all of the managerial, sort of the clerical work involved in running the channel. Like I said, I do want to do some sort of videos, like a series of videos, not necessarily like a full-fledged series, but just a series of these in real life videos talking about that process, because I feel like I'd like to get my thoughts out there, and maybe it'll help someone, right? Maybe someone can glean some advice that does apply to them. Certainly, it's all subjective. It's not going to apply to everybody, regardless. Sorry. Talking that needs to be had in a separate video over that way. Anyway, just as well, as a reminder, I mentioned this a week or two ago, maybe 3 ago, coming up very soon, tomorrow in fact, I'm going to be getting 2 out of 4 of my wisdom teeth taken out, and that may have me debilitated to some effect, so I've recorded a little bit of videos ahead of time. I may do the same with an in real life video as well. I may try and record ahead, get next week's done. May try and plan ahead for that. But if in the event there's not a video out that day aside from a short or whatever, that's the reason why. And of course, I can't remember right now off the top of my head. Eventually I'll get the other 2 taken out as well in short manner, in a short amount of time. And that'll probably have some degree of impact too. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Like I said before, a week or 2 ago, this is about the age that my mom also had her wisdom teeth taken out. So it figures, of course, that this may also be a period in time where I need the same thing to happen. And hey, here we are. Anyway, until next time, please take care of each other.